You're making delegation way too hard. And I've talked to plenty of entrepreneurs that they want to delegate tasks. They want to get things off their plate to be able to maybe just do less, maybe to do other things that are going to continue to build their business. And yet they struggle to actually start delegating. So in today's episode, I want to go through some of the tactics that I personally use and I have helped other entrepreneurs with in order to delegate better. But before we get into today's episode, make sure you go back to last week's episode and see what task you should delegate. We talked through exactly how to list out all your tasks and how to prioritize what should be delegated first. So hopefully you've already listened to that. And if you have, great. Listen in, because we're going to talk about how to actually delegate those tasks. So there's a couple ways we can go about delegating. One, literally just tell a person, here, do this task. And while that would be amazing, most people cannot just pick up a task and start doing that. And this is where most entrepreneurs get hung up at. They want to just hand it off and assume this person is going to be like us, where they're just going to figure it out. Because as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, that's what you have to do. You just figure it out as you go. Well, as an employee or as an assistant, that's not necessarily how it is. Yes, in some cases, you're going to have people on your team that they're just like you. They're that intrapreneur instead of the entrepreneur, and they are going to just go figure it out. But a lot of people really need direction. So how do you give them this direction? Well, two ways. One way is a little more difficult. It's going to take more work on your side, but the other way is one that will empower your employee. So the first one is creating SOPs, or standard operating procedures. I suggest that you do this in the long run, but for the short term, you can have that, and that's amazing. It's going to give the employee that you're delegating the task to exactly how to do it, because you've taken the time to write that down. But I get it. You're a busy entrepreneur. You're not able to do this. So how can we do this without actually creating that SOP first? You need to sit down with the employee and kind of talk through that. But as you're telling them, look, hey, I want you to take a look at this, try and do this yourself. And if you have questions, please come and ask me. Really letting them know that you're here for them. You don't expect them to get 100% perfect, because most people are delegating tasks. They just delegate it and say, yeah, figure it out, get it done. And they don't allow the employee to know that, hey, I understand you're probably not going to get it right, and that's okay, but I want to see what you can get done, so then we can talk about it and say, hey, you missed this thing and this thing. I know I didn't explain it, so let me explain it to you now. And rather than going through and explaining everything from A to Z, maybe you're explaining C and then L and then Q, and then finally they have the full result overall, because you were able to go and just say a couple of things. And then from there, what you can do on the backside of this is now have them create an SOP based on the steps that they know how to do. And again, just like you check their work after they tried and maybe they failed or they didn't quite get it right up to the standard that you had, now you can look at that SOP and say, okay, yes, this is correct, this is correct. Oh, let's correct this. And you can correct that yourself then. But the awesome thing about this second option is now you've only done about 10% of the work, but you've also empowered your employee. And that's the important thing when it comes to delegation. Yes, it's great to get something off your plate, which is obviously the thing that you're doing with delegation. But outside of actually delegating that work and letting somebody else do it, it's by having them actually do most of that work and get that ownership of the work, because they were the ones that were end up figuring it out. They felt empowered because you gave them that opportunity. You encouraged them to try it out, and you coached them along the way. You might have also told them a little bit, hey, okay, let's do this, or why did you think about doing that? So I'd suggest trying to do some coaching, asking questions about why they decided to go down the path that they did and everything, and then showing them the way that you feel is better, or the way perhaps that you just want it done because that's your standard within your practice of business and everything. But really going and telling the person and encouraging them that they can do it, and have them figure it out and say, hey, we're going to get together on this, check and make sure everything's done. And this is going to be things that are not customer facing necessarily. It's going to be something on the back end, such as, well, I've done this with email templates. I wanted to create some short emails that I was going to send out to try and get on podcasts. And rather than me going and creating the whole template, I simply tasked my VA, my virtual assistant, with doing this. And I said, hey, let's create like a 3 email sequence where we're reaching out to podcast hosts to see about getting on their podcast. Can you write something up and let's look over it? She wrote a couple of emails up. We looked at it. I made some tweaks. In this case, I didn't, ask her like, why were you thinking this or why did you think of that? I just made those tweaks and I gave back to her and I said, okay, look, this is great. You did a great job. Here, I made some touch-ups here just because I wanted to try and make it a little bit more personalized, and some of this maybe she missed or whatever. It's been a while since I did that, but I just touched up the things that she did, and I didn't have to think about creating it. I didn't have to think about it what it was, and now she understands the message more because she's the one that was involved and created it. She created those templates, and then she went out and started actually emailing on my behalf to these podcast hosts. And as soon as something would come in, she would address it with me and say, hey, so-and-so wants to be on the podcast. Can you take a look at the email? Or, hey, what are times that'll work for you? And we started working through that. And then we went back and created an SOP of how to actually do that once we got that system down, which is another topic for another day about when should you create an SOP. But this is how we went about delegating that. And that's how I go about delegating a lot of my tasks, is I empower my employees to start to figure it out. Unless it's something that's super complex or some kind of software system that you just need to know what to do. And then I'll take screenshots and things of that nature. But it's something that it's more a soft skill. There's not a one size fits all kind of approach. It's there's multiple ways to get to the final solution. I like to give it to my employee, let them work through that. We'll talk through it, do some coaching, get it fixed up and everything, and then we'll create an SOP afterwards out of that. But you can also just start with the SOP first and let them work through that and ask questions as needed also. The worst thing that you can do is sit there and watch over them every single step. And yes, at the beginning, when you first delegate those tasks, you're going to be looking over it. Hey, let's check on it. But give it to them. Actually delegate that task. That's another pitfall that I've seen of entrepreneurs, is that they will delegate the task and then they'll sit there and check up on everything. Hey, have you done this yet? Where are we at with this? And they want to know every little step that's going on, and almost like they're being CC'd or carbon copied in every single email, every single action that's happening. They want to know. And now you're not even delegating it. You might as well kept it yourself. So make sure that you actually delegate that task. You actually give that task over to your employee and really empower them to do that. Empower them to think of what that best approach might be, and then go back and create that SOP afterwards. And if you found this helpful, let me know. Leave a comment. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Shoot me a DM to hear those thoughts, but I would love to hear what you thought about this, if you found this helpful or not.